it wasn't until he was in the hospital dying, he was talking to his best friend. He was like, you got to be proud of John, like what he's become. And I heard him. He said, Tony, John surpassed me years ago. That kid has hands of gold. I almost fell over. It's tough, because I craved that my whole life. And to finally hear it, it was hard. But he's the one who pushed me. So that's why I'm always trying to do better.
Welcome to episode 130 of the AFT Construction Podcast. I'm Brad Levitt, and today we have John Coppola with us, who's owner of Coppola Custom Woodworking. And John originally grew up in New York City. He learned the craft in New York City from his father, moved to Phoenix 5 years ago, and we dove into the difference between the trades and the market and the type of construction from New York to Phoenix. Also that communication between general contractor and trade partner, how that integrates with customers, clients, designers, architects, and really some of the most difficult parts about his job, being a one-man person who's running all aspects of his business and why he chose to do so. And we dove into why that's important to think about your long-term goals and your short-term goals, how you communicate, what makes you happy, and what defines success, and especially the emotional connection he had with his father and mother and the inspiration they gave him. There's some amazing content, great inspiration from John. So without further ado, let's get started. And just a reminder to sign up for the Contractor Coalition Summit. It's that simple, contractorcoalitionsummit.com. Morgan and Jamie from Construction of Style, Nick Schiffer with NS Builders, and I will be hosting this. This will be in Nashville on Sunday, May 1st through Wednesday, May 4th. It'll change your business. Go sign up. We'll see you there. So welcome to the AFT Construction Podcast. Today we have with us John Coppola. Welcome, John.
Hey, thank you for having me.
And John is, he's the owner of Coppola Custom Woodworking, and he's here local. And John and I have connected actually through Instagram. We've known each other, 5-6 years now. It's been quite a while.
Yeah, about almost 5 years. That's so long. I met you almost very shortly after I moved here.
So what I love about this is interesting. I want to speak about this because most people, when they move to a new area, right? It can be new. You came from New York to Phoenix.
Yep.
You're making this huge transition for you and your family, totally different market. You don't know anybody.
Yep.
So how did you begin just pounding the pavement to start opening these relationships?
So to take it way back, like my father, I worked for him my whole life. He taught me work ethic, put the work in and you'll get out what you put in. So I was doing great in New York. I had a great business. We were getting tired of how expensive it was, how small your property was, and how hard you had to work. So we decided to make the move here. And I'm all positive because my business is doing great. I'm booked up. And then I move here, and literally the day I get here, I'm like, what did I do? Like, I don't know anything. I don't know where to get material. I don't know anything.
Right. Supply house, contacts,
Exactly.
Lead generation. I mean, all this stuff is just a cold start.
Starting from like scratch. So I set my shop up. I rented it from Craigslist from New York. Never even saw it. I drove all my equipment because I didn't trust anyone. So I drove all my equipment here, set up my shop. Took me a little while. And then every time I'd go to Home Depot, I had a stack of cards. Anytime I saw a contractor that looked like someone I would want to work with, I'd hand them my card. I would drive around town to any construction sites. Hey, do you need this? Do you need that? And I was like giving my work away because I knew if people saw my work, they're going to want to hire me. Or that was my thought. So even one guy, he was a contractor. It wasn't really work that I wanted to do, but he asked me how much. I said, let me work for you for the week. You pay me what you want to pay me at the end of the week. And, tell me I'm worth it. And I did that. And that worked out for a short term. Because I was noticing the differences at that point between New York and Arizona, where a lot of the contractors or building is so fast here that sometimes quality wasn't the issue, it was speed.
Right.
And that was hard for me to get used to. It's still hard for me to get used to.
So what is that big difference when you look at your career in New York as opposed to in Arizona now 5 years? I mean, what is that distinction?
So I would say within the last year, I'm starting to get to the place I want to be here, where in New York, people wanted quality. And here it seems more that people ask me, when I could get it done and my price. And I get it. It's fast and there's a lot of people here, but that's not the people I want to be. I want someone who wants me because they like my work. They like the way I build things, my designs, my finishes. I want someone to want my work, not, oh, he fits our timeline or he fits the price. Let's get him in. I give an honest price, and if it's too high or if it's low, it's whatever it is. But for the first bunch of years, I was just doing work for people who it fit or the price was right, or and some of the larger companies that I had to bid against were so cheap.
Yeah,
in their cabinets, and and I told them, I'm like, I'm not gonna lower my prices I'm not going to lessen my quality of a product just to meet a price line. I have a limit. I use certain materials, like particle board here is very acceptable. And I get it. The climate's different, but in New York, it's a 4-letter word unless it's commercial. So, right. You go on site with particle board cabinets in a multi-million-dollar house, you'll get thrown out. And here it's very acceptable. And the moisture is different. So I get that it could be a more sustainable or usable product. Here, I can't bring myself to do it. So my material costs right off the bat are like 3 times higher. A sheet of plywood is almost $100, where a sheet of particle board is $30.
Right.
But again, when people start nitpicking those little differences at the end of the job, if it's an extra $1,000, if it was me, if it was my home, I'd want to pay the extra $1,000 and have something that I feel is a stronger, better, lighter cabinet than otherwise.
Well, I want to come back to just really this pivot in your mentality as you start to understand not just your bandwidth and capability, but that relationship side. How that changes when you really understand. Okay, here's my target demo. Here's who I'm gonna market towards, and this is what I'm gonna do. But before we get there, I think what's important is how do you. This is the biggest struggle I think most of us have. Is on paper. We may sit with the client, and I do this from my side. A client says, Brad, I want you to be at X price to build my house, right? That maybe they've walked other homes or been other parts of the country and they see this home. But on a piece of paper to say, well, here's the level of quality, here's the product being installed. Like there has to be some education where they really understand, well, what's the difference between particle board and plywood, right? Why is this price more? And so it's really helping them understand the bid. And I think a lot of builders and a lot of clients have a hard time communicating that it is an upgrade and there's craftsmanship and there's a reason behind that. So do you feel that there's had to be some education with your contractors or clients?
Yeah, I do. And I kind of don't really give them that option of certain things. I'll tell them where I'll go, but the materials I choose are the materials I choose. And I would only do for myself what I would do for a customer. And that's really the end be all. Like, if I lose money on a job because I feel like it's the right move on a certain product and they're iffy on the price and I like the customer and I'll give them the better product, because at the end of the day, it's my name on there as well. So in 6 months, if the product I knew that would fail, I'm not going to offer that. I'm not going to give it to them. And if I really want to go ahead with the job, I'm going to eat that and go ahead and do it, because again, it's my name and I know that my customer will benefit from it in the long run. And that'll produce, they'll call me back after that. So maybe I lose a little bit of material money, but I'll get it back. So I don't try to educate them too much, because sometimes customers, they get confused with that and they think you're trying to pitch them on something. And although my father would always tell me I am a salesman, I'm a horrible salesman. I really am. I'm passionate about what I do. I love doing what I do. And I've been doing it for a very long time, so I know what works and what doesn't. And well,
it's interesting. I think most builders, contractors, subcontractors, trade partners, doesn't matter at what level, that there comes a point when you start your company, and we'll apply this to you, John, where you moved to Arizona, and although you had a ton of experience, it's in a different market, different clientele, now you're starting from fresh. So now, yeah, there has to be not so much a discount, but there is an education as far as, hey, I'm going to have some lost leaders because I'm building my reputation, right? So yeah, I'm going to do this work, pay me what you think I'm worth. I'm going to pound the pavement and just kind of find my lane. But at some point, that switch flips, right? Where you're like, okay, now I've built a reputation. I've shown my quality. I have enough work where I can charge what I'm worth. And so that happens at some point where now you can really dictate your scope of work, the lane that you want to be in working, and not try to fight and be everything to everyone, but be specific to what you want to do and what's going to be, your brand.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like within the last year, that's kind of been coming true to me because I was getting a little burnt out, I have to be honest, doing a lot of stuff that I don't want to say that I didn't want to do, but wasn't me. And now I'm starting to, I have more than one customer who's pretty much like they wanted a vanity bathroom. They're like, do what you think is cool. Like, no clue as to what they were getting until I installed it in their house. Like, that's cool to me. And when I take on that project, I know in my head, this could be, if they didn't like it, I would take it back, throw it away, not charge them for another one because they gave me that leeway because they trust me. And I like that trust. And it's like gambling in a way where I like that kind of a gamble. They have faith in me and they like what I've created in my Instagram or whatever, that they trust to do that. And that's what's cool. And I'm starting to get that rather than just shaker kitchen every single time. Like, it's like white shaker and white oak. Like it's like, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful combo, but like you get burnt out doing that same thing.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the Instagram side because what I found from our market, I look back early in my career, and this is probably similar to you, John, where, I was doing everything, any project our company was. And I remember sitting down with the client, and it's one thing to sit there and try to, I don't want to say educate, but at least communicate with the client and say, okay, Brad, so what you're telling me, and this is the client's perspective. He says, so you're telling me that this other builder's at $2 million, at you're at $2.3 million for nicer drywall? That was his comment. And it made me think, because how are we communicating, whether it be the level of product or detail or supervision or systems, whatever it may be, it's really hard to do that. But what I found is, okay, fast forward 5 years from when I had that meeting 5 years ago, I've had now time to sit there on different social media platforms and networking. And I have product in the market where clients can walk through and they can see the quality. They can see, call it thought leader, call whatever, as we share, hey, we're getting into building science, we're doing a net zero house. Clients will gravitate that, right? Then they really see, okay, there is a stark difference, right? It's just like a car to car lot, from a luxury car to maybe a standard entry level. Yeah, the price tag's different. The square foot price is different, but there's a huge difference in quality and execution and customer service and white glove service, right? All these things play in, and it doesn't just happen overnight. That's similar to you, John, where you're chasing a step, but there comes a point when people recognize, if I hire John, I get something quality, and that means something.
Yeah, it's very similar in the fact that, like, what I don't know that the customers notice, but I feel that they do. A lot of times, I'm fixing other people's mistakes on jobs. And like you were saying about the sheetrock, a good sheetrock job that costs more, it's not just the sheetrock. It translates to your cabinets, because now hopefully your walls are straighter. The spackle jobs are better so that you get a cleaner filler, that you're not looking at a wavy, gravy filler on the wall, or your countertops go in and they're not scribing a million. So it's like looking out for the next trade. Each trade, you pay a little extra, your framing's better. Now your sheetrock's going to be better. Now it's like building a foundation. If the foundation is good, everything else above it's going to get better and better and better. And so what they don't understand is, by doing the better sheetrock, even though you're paying extra for that, it's going to make everything else look that much better at the end product.
And to your point, it's the tools and resources. I look at a good framer when they're done framing a job and they're coming to pick up, and they have furring strips and they have levels and they're straight lining the house. And then you have the drywaller that's shimming drywall. There are drywallers that do that, and it's such a different level of detail that, to your point, now when all the trades follow, when wood flooring goes in and you have these pony walls and corners that aren't crooked and cockeyed, it makes a massive difference right into level of detail. For you, John, this is why leave New York? If you had a great business there, you're successful, great reputation, plenty of work, why do you pull the plug and say, okay, Phoenix it is?
There was a lot of reasons. For one, for the simpler reasons, was the cold weather. I was getting sick of I used to love the cold. I couldn't do it anymore. Like, and shop space and everything was so expensive. It's so cold that, you're wearing gloves in your shop, and it's like even colder in the shop than it is outside. It's rough. And my thought was, or my family's thought, my wife, was that I could come here where it's less money to live and maybe I wouldn't have to work as much. Now, the only problem with that is I love work. I love my family and I love spending time with them, but I love to work. So working a lot isn't always a bad thing for me. But that was the plan, for me to scale back my work and get away from the cold. And we didn't want to move somewhere where we knew nobody. So my wife has her parents and her sister lives here. So we said, let's visit Arizona and check it out. And if we like it, let's make the move. And so we visited her. We stayed here for like 2 weeks, I think, and we liked it. So
when did you come down? Was it in the spring or was it in the summer?
it was, I don't even remember. It was the spring because my my brother-in-law, he works for the Stadium 84. So we got to see the spring training game when we came down. So it was definitely
Did it
warm.
hit you your first summer here?
No, I didn't mind. All I thought to myself was, I could deal with this way more than I could deal with the winter, because the winter's not just cold. Then you get the snow and the ice, and you can't drive anywhere. It's brutal,
It's so funny because I'll get comments that, everyone says, well, at least when it's cold, you could put more layers on it. I'm like, no way.
No.
Like, it's just so hard in construction. For me, I can handle July all day long, even come from San Diego. Like, I love the heat. To me, it's
way easier.
So how does it differ contractor wise? When you look at the GC in New York as opposed to the GC here, is there a difference in communication or process?
In my experience here, now, I can't speak for everybody, but the contractors I dealt with in New York were more, I don't want to say more on top of it, but they had guys, just like when I worked with my father, they had guys who actually were there babysitting. And people who would be there, who knew the trade very well, and would make sure, all right, the electricians are here. For one example, I did this law office, this whole entire law office, and this girl Carissa, she was the project manager for the job. The first day on the job, she came in with like laminated binders for every trade, and on each room that we did, it would
This is in New York?
Yeah.
Okay.
It would say every trade that was in this room, because it was a whole law office, every room. And she would get all of them in the room and be like, all right, any problems with this? The electrician, you're here. The outlet's in the right place. Plumber, any questions for all you guys? All the contact info was there. And it was very, went as smooth as possible for a job, for me. And a lot of the contractors were like that in New York. And on top of that, I worked a lot for more customers in New York. Here, I don't work for customers, really. It's either designers or contractors. And that's another big thing. A lot more homeowners I worked for, just straight for the homeowner in New York.
Did you like that more? I mean, how's the relationship between you and the end consumer direct as opposed to working through a designer or builder?
I did like it better working for the customer.
How come?
Because I could give them, I can't, when I speak with the contractor, I have to watch what I say because I don't want to get the contractor in trouble. If there's things that I don't like that the contractor did, I can't really put them out. But I feel bad for my customer because I know it's not right. So I'll say something to the contractor, and I've said it here many of times. And I'd be like, listen, I don't care about redoing this. Just make sure that this is right, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And it puts me in a tough spot because I have a conscience. I feel bad because I know something's not right. And I've encountered that numerous times here. Where when I work for the customer, I can let them know. And a lot of times, because I grew up not just building cabinets. My father was a general contractor, so I worked for him my whole life. We did extensions, kitchens, bathrooms, dormers, and we were like a frame to finish construction company. So we oversaw everything. The only things we didn't do is electrical, plumbing, and towards the end, we stopped doing the spackle. We would have these guys come and do the spackle, but we did everything. So I kind of know my whole way through the trade from frame to finish. And then after that, I went beyond finish and built cabinets and furniture. And stuff like that. So when I saw things that aren't right, I one, know how to fix them, and two, would like my customer to know.
So if I understand correctly, I mean, when you're working with the customers, not only the communication side, but there's opportunity where you're almost more of a manager to help put these pieces together. Whereas when you're working with the contractor, there are other trades involved, there are other parties, and you're trying to tiptoe around, making sure you're not throwing someone on the bus, and it's just a little bit different process.
Yeah, like when I see, when I was working for that one guy doing his whole house, and the cabinet guys were there the countertop guys were there to do their template. I couldn't help but make sure that they were templating it correctly. Because, I line my cabinets not to the wall, but it has to be straight because the walls aren't straight. And I wanted to make sure that they were doing the same with their countertop. And I wanted to make sure that the stove was going to fit because it had specific measurements that they needed for the stove, which, funny story, it didn't because they didn't listen to me, even though I stood there. But like, I have to sit there and be like, this isn't really my place. And I don't want to get in trouble telling them something that I shouldn't be telling them.
Yeah, you don't want to take ownership and be culpable.
Exactly.
Even though there is a mistake happening. I mean, that would be hard to watch to say, hey, this is inefficient. It's done incorrectly.
Right.
It's interesting because, and this goes back to your comment about the systems. And so when you look in New York and were these bigger firms, I mean, one thing I've seen, and this is a big problem in our industry, is that, and this is feedback I get from clients too, is that, hey, I hired this contractor, and it's not just prevalent to Phoenix. I think a lot of markets are this way, and where they may not have a superintendent assigned, or the job's running itself, or there's no process, there's no organization. And you see how key that is because, someone who's in the trade, such as yourself, John, how hungry you are for someone to, hey, give me some clear direction. Make sure these other guys are templating right. And understand the appliances that will be installed. Understand if there's a backsplash or not. So can we undercut the drywall? Does it have to be scribed? I mean, there's so many different level of detail. And if someone's not there walking them through, it's just things get missed. And that is why there's poor quality and poor construction and poor experience with the client.
Yeah, and I think it goes to the fact that it's much larger scale. The building here is insane. Where in New York, you're not doing a lot of new building. It's all old already. So you're either adding on or redoing work. And a lot of the contractors that I worked for back in New York, they were smaller. And I don't know if it's just what I was accustomed to, but it was more like me and my father. We were the crew. We didn't have an A crew, B crew, C crew. Like these guys were coming in, those guys were coming in. It was just us. So we were there every day. So when we did one thing, we knew that we had to do it in a certain way so that the next guy's job would be easier. But the next guy's job was our job because we were the next guys. But even if it wasn't, we'd, like you said, with the shims, with the sheetrock, that was us. We would, obviously crowning all our lumber, but even on walls that weren't structural, we'd be saw cutting them, straightening them, and then scabbing them so that they were pinned straight, as close to straight as we could go, so that when we did the sheetrock, it was less shimming. So that when that was done, when we put our cabinets to the wall, they're more. Everything falls, and it's like dominoes. Each thing has to be right for the next thing to be right. And here I noticed on the people that I've worked with, some that wasn't there. This guy's job was to install this, and that's all he thought about, and that's all he cared about. He was done with his job. He's done. The next guy comes and he'll be like, "Well, this isn't right, so I could only do it like this. So this is my job, and now that's done." And then at the end of the line, that one little thing, then the next one, it gets bigger and bigger, and then it becomes a bigger problem. And a lot of times it ends up being my problem to fix at the end, installing the final stuff like the cabinetry or the molding or anything like that, because they all equate at the end. They all line up, like even just walls. That's my biggest complaint here is like the sheetrock is so out of level.
It's so bad. And the framing's so bad.
It's so bad. Like it just blows your mind sometimes. Like I'll have fillers on an 8-foot cabinet that'll go from half an inch to inch and a quarter. Like, and that is just.
I'm sure when you're looking at that, it just drives you nuts.
Nuts. It drives me crazy. And I have to look at the customer, and I don't know why. I could see my father in my head telling me, "Don't bring this to people's attention." But I'm like, I can't do anything about that. This isn't me. I can't, and the corner beads, like it's like they're puttying with like a 4-inch knife because they go from like that and they taper in so hard. So when you're trying to get a cabinet in like a niche or something, it's really hard to get them because it's so built up. But it's not everybody. It's obviously.
And it's not, and we don't want this to seem like it's a downer on the industry, which you're not at all, John. But really what the crux of this conversation is that even in your eyes from the trade side, there's a stark difference between companies that are organized, that have appreciation from the trade, that have a supervisor there, that understand their systems, because really what this comes down to is a better client experience, a better experience for you. And at the end of the day, if our trades, and our trade partners are profitable, if you can come in, perform, be efficient, be safe, and get your product in, it's going to allow you to come back and to take that phone call when I'm calling you, because, hey, if I'm working for Brad or whoever this other GC is, that this is done right, I could come in and be out, and I know he's going to be ready when he tells me.
Yeah, and it works for both of us because you'll make my work easier. My work will go in better. You'll look good. Everything will look good, and it's just a better experience. And I have met a few contractors here, and they're the ones that I really do enjoy working with, who share similar mindset to me as like, for me, the customer is first. It really is. Like money, this is where I am a horrible businessman. Money is the last thing on my mind. My customer is getting the right job and being happy. And I make tons of mistakes as well. I'm a human, but I'll make sure that I make my mistakes right. I'll correct them in any capacity that I can. And I've met contractors here that share the same values as me. And I'm sure there's a lot of them, but I've only come across a few, and I enjoy working with them. And back to when I worked with my dad in construction, we had similar relationships with our customers. Like they were our friends because we were part of their lives for so long, 3 months, and we would go out to dinner with them. Like we'd spend time, like they became friends. They were like almost like family. And that was like every single job. And when I came here, there was a very much of a disconnect. It was just like, we're contractors, you're our client, and this is the job that needs to get done. And there's nothing wrong with that. It was just a new experience for me to, I like to be personable. I like to like my clients and like the contractors that it makes me want to work with them more when I enjoy them as a friend or anything like that.
So what advice would you give to someone as they're thinking about how could I build a better rapport relationship with my client or my trade partner? What are maybe steps you and your dad did or that others could do to, bridge that connection and make it more of a personal experience as opposed to just a transaction?
I feel like being honest, and sometimes or a lot of times it's not the right fit between a customer and yourself. And I feel like gauging that from the beginning is very important because it's going to only be better for the customer. If I don't feel like I'm right for a customer, then I'd rather put them onto someone that they would be more happier with than to force something just because, this job, I need this job or I want this job because, I need to fill this slot. I'd rather not have that slot filled but do the right thing for the customer and myself. Because a lot of times you'll get I'm sure you've had those red flags when you meet the customer, and not that there's anything wrong with the customer, but their views and their expectations of what's going to happen are not coinciding with yours. And you could get the job, but do you want the job? Are you the right person? I feel like I could work with anybody, but do I want to work with anybody? And so I feel that if contractors are more honest, not that they're not honest, but that's just a way I feel it could help bridge that gap with a customer. If they're just honest, like, the whole thing with like social media, I feel it's like a lot of it is, I don't want to say disingenuous or not honest, but I don't trust it as much as like when people used to hit me up on Instagram and stuff like that. Oh, I love your work. I'm like, come to my shop, see my work. Then we can talk and see if we're a right fit to go forward from there. But
that's interesting if I interrupt you, because social media, there's a lot of pros to it, right? And as you mentioned, especially coming in, which we could talk about here in a second, how that's helped build your bandwidth and portfolio, and especially your lead generation. But at the same time, it could be misleading, right? Because we can present a picture that may not show all the details or the difficulty getting to that point, or what does it
Right.
really look like? Does it perform? And to your point, it's interesting to hear this perspective where, yeah, some may reach out and say, John, I love your work, incredible craftsmanship. And you're like, well, come see if this is real. Come to my shop.
Yeah.
Come see how I'm building this to make sure it all lines up.
Yeah. It's like, it's the truth because, growing up with my dad, he gave me a lot of advice and stuff. And I didn't appreciate it as much as a kid. But one thing he would always tell me is like, pictures tell lies. And it's so true. And I understand that it's a necessary evil. You have
Pictures
to have
tell
that.
lies. I've never heard that.
Yeah. And it's the truth. Like how many times I've been on many jobs that I've seen posted that do not look like the post, and that's just the God's honest truth. And that's why I would implore people to see my work, touch it, feel the finishes, that you see on Instagram and you write me that it looks so smooth or that's nice finish or whatever. Come and feel it, see it for yourself. Like, I would guarantee you that you'll be more impressed with it in person than you would in the picture. And that's how I would hope. That's my goal, is always trying to one up. So pictures are cool and all. And like you see a lot of them with professional photographers doing all these stuff. And I totally get it. It's 100% needs to be done. But at the end of the day, I'd love to see those in real life and compare the two, where I would rather mine look grainier and not as good online and come to my shop and see them and be more impressed than the picture.
For those of you that have listened to the podcast, you know how big of a fan we are of Build-A-Trend and that we have used this software for the last 4 years. And many of the guests that we brought on the podcast are also Build-A-Trend users. And in this day and age, with as busy as all of us are in construction, as complicated as it is with escalation pricing, lead times, tracking, organization, all of us need a good project management software to help simplify and organize our business. And there are a couple features that we love a ton about Build-A-Trend. And one is the owner portal. The other is the daily logs. And these are features that we use daily, right? Half of my clients are out of state. And as an owner, it is so imperative how we communicate with our clients, with our team, with our customers. And through Build-A-Trend, this allows us that quick connection. They can check at any time. We can communicate with them. We're up to date. This has actually helped us win jobs, win projects because of that organization, especially at pre-construction. And Build-A-Trend also offers a ton of service on the back end, training and understanding and workshops, to help us use their software effectively. They also have the podcast, The Building Code. To learn more, head to buildertrend.com/AFT to get a 60-day money-back guarantee on your Build-A-Trend account. That's 60 days to make sure you love this product with no pressure, and I know you will. This episode is brought to you by Pella Windows. When it comes to building homes at AFT, almost every project has Pella Windows. And they've been just an incredible partner of ours. And locally, Sammy and Adam, they are not only amazing business partners behind us, but they are super close friends. And I speak on the podcast all the time about the importance of relationships, right? Relationships with our customers, with our vendors, with our suppliers. Because at the end of the day, I'm only as good as those that help our brand and assist us in our projects to take it from the ground up all the way to completion. And if we didn't have partners such as Pella, there's no way we'd be who we are today. Over the years, we've built this amazing relationship. When we call them or email them, they respond. They're quick. Their company culture, their integrity, their honesty, they are always there to do what's right for us and the customer. They can do anything from small replacement projects to large custom homes and even multi-million-dollar commercial projects. And also, when you think about their product line, they can do ultra contemporary, historical preservation, and large traditional projects. So for anyone, any scale, any size, they're the ones to call. They're here local. They have an amazing Instagram. Make sure and give them a follow to see what they're doing. So if you need windows and doors, give Sammy and Adam a call. We stand behind Pella. We love what they do, their culture, their brand, and especially their quality. And if you want to learn more about Pella Windows, check our show notes. We'll have everything tagged there so you can give them a follow and have their contact information to reach out. What are some of the advantages when you look at, as you're trying to begin this market, what are some of the platforms you went after? How did that help build, your relationships?
Yeah. So as much as I feel like I dislike Instagram, it brought me to where I am here in Arizona. Because in New York, I had 3 followers, and they were my 3 friends, and we would just send silly pictures of just nothing. There was nothing to do with work. I got here, and a couple of guys from another state told me, "Yeah, push this, but do it," and I did, and it's what got me busy here. So that's how designers and people saw my work. I would post a lot of my old work from New York and stuff like that. So as much as I feel like I don't like I can't hate it, because I would be fairly nothing without it, because it let a wider audience see what I could do to get me in the door. I don't feel like it got me to where I am, but it opened those doors for me to show people my work.
So what, as a woodworker, and you do custom woodwork, and there's a vast array there, from cabinetry to so many things. What is the most difficult part of your job, or something that you deal with that maybe most of us listening just can't comprehend or are unfamiliar with?
It's the time management for me, as far as like, if something's, I'm not a production shop, so it sounds so simple. I just got to build these cabinets. Well, sometimes things go wrong. Something goes wrong with the finish. I'm not going to rush it and try to fix it in a way that can still get the job done on the time. I used to tell people, even in New York, sometimes I would have this issue, and I would tell them, any extra time that this is taking is only going to benefit you. I'm not going out, hanging out. I'm trying to make your job that much better, because I wasn't happy with it the way it was going, and I had to redo something or move from there. So I would say that and the actual part of running a business is the hardest. That is by far the hardest part for me.
So how do you do that? I mean, for John, what's amazing to me, and the reason I want to ask you, is that one-man band. I mean, it's easy to say that because you're self-performing the craftsmanship. You're running the company. You're doing bids. You're meeting with clients. I mean, you're balancing so much in a day. I mean, how is that trying to balance all aspects, being just yourself?
Yeah, and family. It's
and
hard.
Family.
It's
Yeah.
hard. Yeah, and then like, when I blew my knee out, when I blew it out, I was trying to take positives out, and the only positive I had was, for 2 months I was home with my kids. Got to see them come home every day from school, and that kind of made me take a step back and say, all right, I'm not working Sundays anymore. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, because I did. I worked Monday through Sunday. And my days, I go in at 5:30 and I go home 7, 8, 9 o'clock. I mean, and that's fine. I'm not complaining or anything. I enjoy it. But it takes me that long, because I do have to, some days I can't be in the shop. I got to go on estimates, like tomorrow. So when I can't be in the shop for a couple hours, that's a huge loss.
System's down.
That's, nothing is getting done. So I have to put in that extra days and time.
Has it ever brought the question, maybe I should hire? I mean, what is there a reason why you've wanted to stay small or not hire, or is it?
There's a couple of reasons. One, I'm very much a control freak, and I know that's it. My father would tell me that all the time. It's a huge hindrance. He would always tell me, one man doesn't equate to 50% more work. Another man is like 80% more work getting done. And he's right, because I could run out and someone's doing something, sanding parts, but I would just redo it anyway. So, and the other thing is, being successful and creating a successful business is all relative in all different people's eyes. So for me, being a one-man shop and staying a one-man shop, I'm not looking to be a multimillionaire. What makes me feel successful and know that my business is running properly is that my family's happy, my kids are happy, they have a house, they're able to eat, and we're able to do the things that they want to do. So by me staying as a one man, I'm able to control that better, in my opinion. It makes certain portions very hard, but in other portions, I crave that.
Well, I love that you shared that, because the key to business, and it doesn't matter if you're a one-man shop, one-woman shop, right? And it doesn't matter if you're a conglomerate and you have thousands of employees. The reality is, John, you have to understand your personality, what drives you, what motivates you, and your comfortability level, right? Am I okay delegating tasks? Do I need to control that? Am I, more involved? But understanding yourself and understanding your goals and understanding what makes you happy, that's going to be the key to business. It's not about the dollar, right? There's so many different definitions of success and happiness, and you need to find what fits you.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I know for a fact that I could hire 2 or 3 guys and I can make a lot more money. But Would I be happy with the product I'm putting out? Would I be happier as far as my business is concerned? I don't think so. And it's not like I'm you add more people and it's just inevitable. Quality's going to go down. It has to. It's because they're not going to do it how you would do it. And you could teach them only to a certain degree. And then before long, they'll leave and go with someone else. And then you got to reteach someone else. And I don't mind teaching people. I actually enjoy doing that. I'll help anybody. But at the end of the day, the more guys you hire, each level is going to go down because they're not as vested in it as you. It's my name. It's not their name. So they want to open up their own business maybe someday. So they're just learning until they can move on to the next thing that's better than working for me. And that's just my opinion to it. So, I see lots of guys who just have a couple of guys in a cabinet shop and it makes everything easier. Installing is obviously easier than be just one person.
Well, yeah, as you get into hiring, I mean, it is, there can be disconnect. Every arm you add on is a extension of yourself, but you start to lose. It's like playing a telephone game, right?
Yeah.
That if you play that telephone game long enough, by the time it gets to the end, it's a totally different interpretation of the original phrase. And so you have to understand what systems, and to your point, understanding that and knowing your personality, John, that's what really makes you successful, right? And then you plan around that once you know a little bit about that. So even from maybe the more technical side, how does it differ when it's one thing to say, I'm going from New York to Phoenix and I'm going to build a new client base and contractor. They're going to communicate. They're going to have different systems, terminology, personality, it's so much different. How does it change, even as you mentioned, we were talking about this earlier, climate, humidity, shop conditions, right? How does that affect, the woodworking craft?
It helps it. Everything's dry. It's more predictable what the wood's going to do. So when I make a panel door, I can make my gaps tighter. I can make my panels tighter. I don't got to pre-finish all my panels before I put them together because I'm not worried about that shrink. So there's a lot of differences. The one major difference I find is the kinds of materials and things I could get here, where in New York, it wasn't even a question. You wanted a wood from a tiger's claw. They had it in stock at the local store. Here, you want something like rosewood. And, I don't know where we could get. You want it in a plywood? Like, I can't even get pre-finished walnut plywood like easily here. Like, it's like, we have to find that in order. Like, where in New York, all my materials were just like, it wasn't even, if a customer had some crazy idea that they had, I was just like, okay, no problem. They had it. Here, they'll say something, or I'll say something because I'm so used to that. I'll be like, we could do it like this. And I catch myself. I'm like, let me see if I'm able to even get that material to give you what I'm wanting to do. That's a very tricky part here.
Do you feel it's because New York has a little bit more international flair influence that it's,
I do, I guess. Yeah. I really can't put my finger on why, because we're so close to California. Like, you think that we could get, like, you think that they would, I don't know. I really don't know why. It's a fight a lot of time. And the material, that's another thing. Learning new suppliers here. And they just now are starting to learn me. Like, they used to send me stuff and I tell the truck driver, turn around, send it back. This is no way. I'm like, did anyone even look at this before they put it on a truck? I don't want it. And they got sick of get trucks going back and forth that finally they would send me, like, they were probably like, oh man, this guy again. Like, I don't care. But they know, like, you had Landon on here. He went to one of my suppliers and he was like, oh yeah, I work with John. And they're like, oh yeah, John, he makes us do this. And he's like, yeah, I'm one of his contractors. I appreciate that he does that. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. Because, where in New York, it's not that it was New York versus Arizona. It was those relationships that we were talking about, that they knew me in New York. So they knew what I was looking for. They knew the product I put out, where here I have to relearn a whole network of people to learn that and get the materials that I am looking for.
Well, that relationship side's key, right? I look at this relationship with our vendors and how valuable that is for me, that now when there's supply chain issues, right? And having those relationships, I can have product expedited. I can find ways around that challenge that we're having. And the same for you, that it takes time for the end clients to understand, okay, what's John's methodology? What's his process? And as you educate them and as you collaborate, well, then that opens that up where, hey, there's less disconnect in the future because you set that expectation to understand, hey, when John's on this job or you're working with Landon, who, knows what he's doing, then yeah, everything's lined out as it should be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The vendors, if you can't get your material, you can't do your job. So that relationship with your vendors and your suppliers is like very important.
So have you had an issue with supply chain with product?
Yeah, I have hinges, drawer slides. I had to keep switching to different kind of drawer slides. And that's tough for me because, like I said, I'm such a control freak. I was Bloom hardware my whole life. I never had a problem with it. Well, I couldn't wait for it anymore. So I had to switch to a new thing, and I had to tell the customer, and they're like, I don't care what kind of drawer slides. You know what I mean? But I'm worried about it. And so then I'm trying this brand, Headage. Oh, all right, they're supposed to be good. I like it. I was using it. And you can't get Headage anymore. Now I'm on to Salice. It's tough. And then getting material. Last week I was just waiting for pre-finished plywood, and it was supposed to come today. Didn't come. They're telling me next week. So what am I going to do? I have no material to do shelves. I have a whole kitchen that's done, but they have no shelves. It's
so
hard.
What's tough for you is, I'd look at that. I deal with that same frustration. It's hard for the clients to fully understand. Most of them are aware because it's pretty prevalent, not just in our industry. You go try to buy a car, there's no cars on the lot, right? Yeah. So it's all these industries where they don't have supplies. But to your point is that, even hardware, this is a very common theme with anyone who does woodwork or cabinetry that I speak with, not just locally, but across the country. They can't get hardware.
Yeah.
How does that affect when you're working with different brands? I would imagine there's some sort of education.
Yeah.
As well, and time, which is now going to cost you time going to new hardware and templating and, however you're building, your jigs and everything in person. I would imagine that also changed your learning curve.
Yeah. Like one of my jobs, I drilled them, not thinking, for a certain hinge, waited for the hinges. I said, I want to be ahead of the game. Let me drill all the doors, get everything finished. They came and it's 2 millimeters different. I'm like, oh my God. Luckily I could get a plate that goes on the cabinet that pushes it out 2 millimeters. But had they not had that.
Yeah. What do you do?
You remake all the doors. It's, that's being a little eager on my part and not looking into it. But you try to do those things because you're trying to get the product to your customer because you don't want them to have to wait. And I'm too small to stockpile 10,000 hinges. I just can't. So
can't have that inventory.
Right. So that's tough for me as well. Like stockpiling any kind of stock, like pre-finished plywood, I order it like every week. So it would make sense if I could order 2 bunks of it and just have it sitting in my shop, but I don't have the room, to do that. So those are some issues.
And there's also cost things too. You're trying to factor and having a ton of inventory. That's a lot of overhead for you.
It is. And I keep everything as
tight as you can.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
controlled.
Yeah, very controlled. I don't like to
especially financially, as you're looking at that product in, product out.
Exactly. Like I don't want to I don't overextend the job. Like I don't ever take from this job to finish that job. I know that always gets you in trouble. So like I play it as close as I can and get the jobs done with what I have until my final payment and then move on to the next. So.
Now, with your product, are you pre-finishing a lot of it? Are you doing a lot of the finishes yourself, like paint booth? Are you outsourcing that?
Oh, no. That's where I'm a control. I build my own doors. I make my own drawers. I do my own finishing. There's pretty much 99%.
So before we get into finishing, is there a reason why, without calling out any manufacturers, is there a reason why you don't pre-order doors and you make them yourself?
Yeah, I ordered doors. Everyone here, when I got here, I always made doors. I made doors in New York. It was just part of the process. I liked it. I enjoyed it. So I had all the machinery, the tooling to do that. I moved here, and one of my good friends who's a cabinet maker, who we think very much alike, he's like, just order your doors. What are you doing to yourself? I'm like, I don't know, man. So I did. They were all wrong. I still have a pallet of them sitting in my thing. They're like, we'll remake them. I'm like, no, I don't want you. I'll make them. So I lost the time and I made the doors. And I didn't even like the quality of them. They weren't horrible. They just...
It didn't fit the brand and what you're doing.
They were too gappy at where the panel fits in. So when you spray finish it, now you're going to have that dark line around the center panel, which looks horrible, and I'm not caulking them. That's just not to be done. It just wasn't. I think it would have looked fine at the end result to 90% of the people, but I didn't like it. So
how difficult is the finish? How does that vary, finish in a product? Again, humidity, climate in New York as opposed to Phoenix.
Oh, it's so nice here. In New York, I got pushed over to waterborne a long time ago because of regulations and stuff. Like if you were shooting solvents and stuff like that, and, fire marshal was there every week. You need to have your MSD. I mean, you still need to have your MSDS and all that stuff, but they were just on you. So I switched over to water base maybe 8-9 years ago when it wasn't even that good yet. But I just figured this is what I got to do because I can't control the other problems with it. So when I moved here, this is like the Wild West. Everyone's still shooting solvents, and it's just crazy. And so I got into the waterborne here, and it's a fantastic finish now, the waterborne. It's just like, you ever notice here, because it's so hot, and that's the other thing. The humidity in New York, finishing would take 10 times longer.
It just dries so fast here.
It dries so fast here. I could spray a job in the morning and install it later that day if I had to. If it was like a rush scenario, it doesn't really cure for 72 hours, but it's dry to the touch in like 10 minutes. For waterborne lacquer, I couldn't even imagine. It would be dry as it's coming out of the gun. But lacquers here, they tend to yellow a lot. Like the whites and stuff like that, in a couple of years, they turn like yellowish white. And they're very hard, if you noticed. Like a lot of cabinets here, they'll crack. They're just the paint at the seams of the shaker doors and stuff. It's because lacquer, nitrocellulose and that kind of stuff is extremely hard finish. And the waterborne is very flexible. It's kind of like bumper paint on a car that's like got that flex to it. So it's a very good finish for this climate here. Because here it's so dry, it actually pulls the solvents out of the materials and dries them out, and the finishes fail. But the solvents, the waterbornes hold up extremely well here.
So are you finishing all your cabinetry yourself?
Yeah. I buy pre-finished plywood for my interior, my boxes, but all my doors, parts, everything like that, I spray. I enjoy spraying. I've always have. It's like probably one of my favorite part of the job.
What's amazing to me, and in my experience, the separation, especially as we're talking about quality and execution, when you find a really good painter, right? A good trim carpenter, a good woodworker such as yourself, good drywaller, right? I mean, it's amazing the distinction and the difference there between a quality job and not so much. Because a good painter, their ability, and I've seen this where you may have some guys using caulk and other guys using Bondo, and the amount of time and prep they're spending, and then they come spray, and what that finish ends up looking like.
Yeah. Definitely. What you see a lot here is on-site finishing. And, that's a whole nother beast. It's fine. It comes out great, but coming out of a shop, I'd love for you to see one of my finishes and compare it to some of your other ones, and just to see the difference of if there is that much of a difference and what it is. Like, I kind of pride myself on my finishes. I feel it's an enjoyment of mine, and I use high quality materials. I use Renner paints. They're from Italy. They have hardener in them, just like automotive. Similar to automotive, not nearly as hard, but a lot of guys I've met here who do their own finishing, they're like, yeah, but that stuff is so expensive. Yeah, but at the end of the day, that little extra you're paying
is performance.
It's performance. And then that customer is going to, I had literally, I'm not even making this up. I had a customer, I built this curved hood for her. And she was just like, well, when the contractor told me it wasn't going to be wood, it was going to be painted, I was nervous. And then all she kept doing was feeling it on it. She's like, but it's so smooth. I love it. And I'm like, it makes me feel good because that's someone's noticing the effort that I'm putting in to give them that kind of finish. They didn't ask for it, but that's what I'm trying to give them.
So how tough is that when you speak about, doing curve? You'll see curved islands, curved upper cabinets, maybe a curved hood. How challenging is that, just to work and with the wood and, add water and mold that? I mean, is that?
I love it. Yeah. Anything that, like, when someone comes up with something that's like different or hard, that's what intrigues me. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, let's do that. Like, even if I've never done it before, I'm 100% game. Like I know I'll figure it out and I'll get it perfect. But I like the stuff that makes me think. Even if I lose money on it, I don't care because it's another feather in my cap. Now I've done that. Like, now it's another skill I could put in my book because you're always learning. So whenever someone comes up, or I'll throw crazy ideas out there that sometimes even I'll be like, why did I do that? But you do it and it comes out great. And, it's just not the same as everything else. Something a little different.
Well, what's key, John, I'm sure you agree, is that, yeah, maybe the first time you may lose money, the first time is this trial and error, you're
Right.
learning it. But as you have gone through that experience of that craft and say, okay, well, I'm going to apply this. And I look at this building a home. It's no different than what you talked about in systems where there's mistakes I've made or my employees have made as we're going through the building process. And we make sure that we identify that and we track it and we have a database and we're accountable. So that way, when we go around the second time, we don't make that same mistake, or at least we know what we're up against. So now, if I'm doing this complicated hillside build or you're doing this rounded cabinet, you know the time that it's going to take and the duration and the sequencing. And so
for the next time.
Yeah. So now you can set a more clear expectation.
Yeah. It's like, I don't think of them as mistakes. I think of them as learning experiences. I learned that and I go, okay, the next time I do this one, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to go straight to doing it this way. It'll take me half the time. And now I've learned it. So although I say I lost money, but like you said, I didn't lose money. I just learned a new skill. And that's how I look at that. Like, it goes way back to like when I grew up working for my father. This guy was old school Italian. He did not give me a single compliment my entire life. Never. Like nothing was ever good. I was always nervous for him to see even when I stopped working for him and I was working for myself, I'd be nervous when he'd come to my shop because he would always be like, "You're going to leave that like that?" And I'm like, what? And I'm like, even my wife would hate when he would come by because she knew how nervous it made me. Even being a grown man, searching for my dad's approval, it was rough. And it wasn't until he was in the hospital dying and he told me, I heard him, he was talking to his best friend and he was Tony, his name was, and Tony was like, you got to be proud of John, like what he's become. And I heard him, he said, Tony, John surpassed me years ago. That kid has hands of gold. I almost fell over. It's tough, because I craved that my whole life. And to finally hear it, it was hard. But he's the one who pushed me. So that's why I'm always trying to do better. If someone comes up with a cool idea of a job, I want to do it, because I don't want to sit on shaker. I want to push it, do something cool. It was.
I love that you share that, John. It got emotional. I mean, for those, you're gonna make me tear up just because I lost my father last month, and I think a lot of us. My dad was the same. I mean, it's a little bit more tough love for me growing up, and it was never like, "Hey, I love you, I'm proud of you." But I remember at his passing, at the funeral, there was a friend of his that came up and he said, "Your dad would always say how proud of you he is, and it's neat to hear that. So I can appreciate that, John, because they had shared some experiences of things he said that I was doing in my career, and he had made the comment, "Hey, I guess for Brad, it's like he's at a point where I don't have to just mentor him every day. I mean, he's off on his own. Like I just have to be there for him." And I'm sure for you that was just hugely emotional, where somebody you're trying to prove and really, I would imagine that really set the tone for you, whether it's competitive drive or determination, level of execution and quality, that you're just trying to reach this bar that your dad set, and it really helped, put you where you are today.
I think it set me not just in my trade, but growing up to be a man. Like, all the things that he would tell you, the small lessons that I didn't appreciate until too late. I didn't, as much as I didn't hear the things from him, I didn't get to thank him. He would always say, John, you learn how to work with these, you'll never be hungry. And he's right. And he taught me how to work with these. Like, maybe he didn't do the cabinet side, but everything that he pushed me towards, like not giving me compliments, it wasn't because he didn't like what I was doing. It's because he didn't want me to rest on my laurels. He wanted me to elevate myself. Nothing, was going to be okay. I used to get mad when I worked for him because a lot of times the boss's son is he could do whatever he wants. I was not that guy. I was the low man on the totem pole. I was the man who had to work. I was always getting yelled at. Like, it was horrible. And I'd be like, why are you getting on me? He's like, and he'd pull me aside. He'd be like, cause I care about you. Them, I don't care about them. You're the one I care about. So it was tough. And, but I appreciate it now more than ever, because he's not here to push me anymore, but
he set the tone.
But he set the tone.
So what made that decision at looking back in your career when you said, okay, Dad, it's time for me to go on my own? What made that transition for you?
He was so good at what he did. He was just so good. And I kind of felt like I was in his shadow. So when I started doing crown moldings and coffered ceilings and stuff like that, he didn't want to really do that. I'm like, this is a little bit of a thing for me. So then he would start pricing them into jobs and, like, complaining that he's losing money on it every time. So after a while, I kind of would do my own side jobs at night, and eventually I decided to take the plunge and just kind of go off on my. It was a tough decision,
Well, it's interesting you say that, because there are a lot of listeners in network, whether through Instagram or the podcast, have reached out, and they're in this tough transition. It may be a family company such as yourself, even no matter the size of the operation, right? There's some point where it's like this wrestle, if you will, where the new generation or the new children that are looking to take over, they may, as you, have different aspirations. Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? Here's this idea. Why don't we, change our system? Why don't we have a designer? Why don't we make selections? Why don't we do crown molding, coffered? And, it's not that they're comfortable, but they've perfected a craft in their, in their genre, in their realm. And so either there has to be some sort of transition together, or like coordination to say, okay, let's do this together, or we separate and now you can go pursue, what you're ready to do, and then build off of that.
Yeah, it's. I've got a lot of people ask me questions like, oh, even in New York, like, when, I want to go off on my own. It's like, there's no like right time or when it's just when you feel it's right. You just got to go 100% and just dive in and do it, because when I was doing those things with my father, he was kind of just throwing them on. He wasn't interested in it, and it was putting more pressure on me, because he would be complaining to me, like, I'd want to paint them. He'd be like, no, if they don't like the paint, then you're stuck, So it was kind of what I wanted to do, but not really. So the only way for me to do what I wanted to do was to go off and do it.
So when you look back, if you were to start today, I mean, what would you have done differently, or applied differently, or set yourself for success more, having been in business for so long by yourself?
Well, without sounding, I kind of wouldn't really change anything.
It's interesting.
I liked my process. I would have hated getting into. I think what makes me good in this field is that I've been through. I loved framing. Oh, that was my thing. Like, I loved it. I loved doing roof systems. Not like here in New York, we did more like actual rafters and hips and valleys and stuff like that. Here, it's trusses and much more, I guess, smarter building here. But I enjoyed all that. And I think all of that helped me become better, because I'm like, oh, this is going to be like this, because I know that that'll be like that behind the wall, and this will be here. And each step helped me be better at the next step. So I kind of.
It's funny you say that, because I ask that question a lot, and I've had discussions offline too, outside the podcast, and it's always a common theme that, maybe you could look back at one thing. Well, maybe my marketing strategy, or maybe my accounting, or maybe I would have billed differently, profit margin, whatever. But the reality is there's growth here. There's joy in the journey. This is a long road, and success isn't defined overnight, right, John? For you, it's not like, hey, I'm successful today and I just started yesterday. I mean, this has been a lifetime. It's been a process.
Absolutely.
And that process is really what determines your confidence and your capability, even as you dove into specifics about level of finish and the chemicals and how that differs. And, that doesn't just come from this quick handoff. There's years of education and failures and products and restarting. And that's a huge part of being an entrepreneur, is that methodology and understanding that, hey, I'm going to make mistakes, I'm going to fail, but as I get up and I learn from that and I correct this, I'm going to be better in the future. And so will my company and my clients, they'll be the. recipient.
It's real world school. Like without that education, I wouldn't be where I am today. So I have to be humble and understand that. So that's why I say I really wouldn't change anything. I've made tons of mistakes in my life as far as business and whatever jobs, but they've all made me smarter about it today. So without making those mistakes, I don't know that I would be where I am. I'm kind of content with where I am here.
Well, your dad's proud. I think it's awesome. It resonates. It's awesome, John.
Thank you. I'm sure. I know your dad is proud as well. It's tough. No matter how old or how long. For me, it's been 6 years. But and on top of that, I just want to throw out there as well. My mother as well. This woman, single mom since I was 3 years old, worked 2 jobs, still works to this day, has put that work ethic in me as well. Like, unbelievable woman that I don't give as much credit to as well. I just think, back then they just made people different, a lot tougher, harder than nowadays. And I just look at that. Even my grandfather, who came here, was in concentration camps or worker camps and fought his way to this country. So when I look back and be like, man, this is rough. No, it's not. It's not rough. Like what they had to go through to get here and what my mom had to go through working 2 jobs, having 3 kids. And that's hard. And same with my father. And I think all that coalesces and makes me a better person today. So I don't want to just put it all for my father. There's a lot to do with my mother.
There's a lot of maturity there because there's a lot of convenience we have today that, generations past and not having a lot of comfort, right, that they did not have. And it's, tested differently. And to your point, I mean, I look at my mom and the example she's been and so stalwart. And, same thing. I think, I can operate with little sleep. My mom probably sleeps 4 or 5 hours a night. I know I get that from her. And she is a workaholic. She raised 6 kids and worked in the school district. I mean, it's amazing what she did. And that example. And John, I think one of my favorite things about this conversation is not only just understand the craftsmanship and kind of your perception and, especially in different markets, but also your determination and, that personal moment, that emotional side. So, what do you have that's upcoming and exciting for those listening?
Well, I got just lots of cool kitchen ideas and just fun stuff. I'm bringing a lot of different finishes. I'm working with that company, Renner, water-based finishers out of California. And we're trying to make cool new finishes. I've been trying. I used to do cerusing a lot in New York, so I've been getting clients to want that here. I've been pushing it because I love it.
Explain what that is for those listening.
So it doesn't have to be painted, but I like it. Like you can lacquer a wood like oak or something that has a lot of open grain, and then you put a patina on it or a glaze that just fills in the crevices, and then you wipe it off, and then you're left with whatever you left on the outside, whether it's like, I like black painted cabinets, and then I'll ceruse some white. Or you could do a much more subtle look. It's like a white oak, just plain white oak with some cerusing, some white cerusing inside the grain, just a little bit of pop. But I'm trying to get them, I'm working with Renner to make me a metallic gold.
Oh, amazing.
Ceruse. Yeah. To go with some brass finishes and stuff like that.
That'd be incredible.
Yeah, maybe on a walnut with the metallic gold.
Amazing.
Yeah, it would be so subtle. But when the light hits it, just be that extra pop. That would be really cool. And so those are some fun things that I'm looking forward to.
Well, you do some amazing work, John. It's been a pleasure to call you a friend and know you for 5 years you've been in Phoenix. And so where can our listeners find you?
Oh, they can find me on Instagram. I'm jcop30. You'll have to bear through some of the skateboarding videos, but I try to keep my Instagram as real. It's pretty much me. Yeah, right. So, but yeah, that's where you can find me, and you can always call me and get some work.
Well, John, you've been amazing. I can't thank you enough for making time today. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. This is so much fun. I was excited to be here.
So thank you all for tuning into the podcast today. And just as a recap, if you check the show notes, they're just going to have all the links for the topics that we discuss. And also one of our favorite features now is the chapters that go through the conversation. So if there's certain topics you want to revisit or listen to, they're outlined by the time that we discuss those. And again, we can't thank you enough for all of your support. Please make sure and download our podcast, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and review wherever you download your podcast.